Most people think the survival skills of Native American tribes began here, on this side of the world, shaped by the plains, the forests, the deserts, and the mountains of North America. But the real story stretches much farther back. Thousands of years earlier, long before the first footprints touched the American continents, small bands of humans endured something far harsher than anything most of us can imagine today: the brutal cold, vast distances, and unforgiving landscapes of ancient Siberia. And here's the part that changes everything. Many of the core survival skills that helped native communities thrive didn't begin here. They were carried across the frozen land bridge of Beringia, preserved through countless generations, and adapted to new environments as people moved southward. What we often see as uniquely American innovations may actually be echoes of much older knowledge forged in a world of ice, scarcity, and relentless challenge. Imagine crossing a continent without maps, without metal, without domesticated animals to pull your supplies. Just the strength of your group and the tools you made with your own hands. The early travelers who stepped onto North American soil brought with them advanced hunting tactics, careful firecraft, clothing systems built for extreme weather, and a way of reading the land that made survival possible in places where most modern travelers wouldn't last a week. Even more surprising are the cultural parallels: shared teaching structures, the role of community guides, similar interpretations of natural signs, and comparable ways of passing essential knowledge across generations. This book is a story of isolated development. It's a story of endurance, migration, adaptation, and a powerful thread of human ingenuity stretching across two continents. If you're ready to uncover how Siberian innovations became the backbone of Native American survival, subscribe now. Every day, we reveal the hidden engineering and ancient strategies that shaped human history. Long before the first pottery bowl was shaped or the first village was built in the Americas, a small population stood at the edge of a world-changing decision. They lived in Siberia during the last ice age, a time when temperatures dropped sharply, the landscape stretched into endless tundra, and herds of massive animals moved across distances that today span nations. These early groups didn't just endure the cold, they mastered it. And eventually, their path led them onto a piece of land that no longer exists: Beringia. Beringia wasn't a narrow crossing. It was a vast region, hundreds of miles wide, connecting Siberia to Alaska. A land of steppe grasslands, cold winds, and migrating animals. For thousands of years, it was both a refuge and a corridor. This land bridge didn't just allow people to pass through. Many lived there for generations, adapting to its challenges, reading its seasons, and carrying forward a way of life shaped by necessity. Archaeological evidence paints a clear picture. The same types of spear points found across ancient Siberia, narrow, finely flaked, built for durability, show up in early North American sites. DNA studies strengthen the connection even further, revealing shared ancestry between modern Native American groups and ancient Siberian populations. The link isn't theoretical, it's written directly into human history. Climate shifts eventually pushed people onward. As ice sheets retreated and new landscapes opened, families moved south and east, exploring unfamiliar environments one careful step at a time. They didn't arrive as unprepared wanderers. They brought with them proven strategies for shelter, clothing, hunting, and tool-making, skills refined over thousands of years in some of the toughest conditions on Earth. This migration wasn't a random drift of people. It was a journey shaped by deep knowledge of the land and the tools that made survival possible. The techniques that later flourished across the Americas had roots in this ancient crossing, a bridge of ice, land, and human capability. Long before written records, before villages grew into nations, the people who lived in the Siberian taiga and the early ancestors of Native American communities developed ways of understanding their surroundings that were shaped by the same challenges. These weren't abstract beliefs. They were practical frameworks for survival in cold forests, sweeping grasslands, and unpredictable climates. And when you compare Siberian traditions with early Native American patterns of life, the parallels are striking. Required groups to stay close-knit. In the taiga, no one survived alone. Cooperation was the rule, not the exception. The same held true across ancient North America. Decisions were made collectively. Daily tasks were divided with intention. Elders played a central role, not as rulers, but as experienced guides who carried crucial lessons learned through years of watching seasons shift and resources change. Their insight often meant the difference between scarcity and stability. Another shared trait was the way people interpreted natural signs. Whether tracking migrating animals across Siberia or reading snowdrifts on the plains, survival depended on noticing patterns others might overlook. The shape of clouds, the direction of wind, the behavior of birds, the feel of the soil. These observations weren't treated casually. They provided information that helped guide travel, hunting, shelter building, and the timing of seasonal tasks. Knowledge wasn't written in books. It was carried in stories, instructions, demonstrations, and daily practice. A younger generation learned by watching experts prepare tools, repair clothing, or choose a campsite. This method of passing skills from one age group to the next appears almost identical across both Siberia and ancient native communities. Even the roles within the group show meaningful overlap. Both worlds relied on individuals who specialized in interpreting signs of illness, advising during difficult seasons, or helping communities make sense of sudden environmental shifts. These weren't mystical figures. They were problem solvers trained through experience. These shared philosophies didn't appear by coincidence. They grew from similar environments, similar dangers, and similar realities of life at the edge of survival. When early Siberian groups crossed into the Americas, they didn't arrive empty-handed. They carried with them a tested toolkit, refined across generations of living in freezing winds, long nights, and unpredictable game migrations. And when you compare the tools found in ancient Siberia with those used by early Native American communities, the similarities are impossible to ignore. These weren't accidental overlaps. They reveal a shared foundation of survival engineering built long before the first footsteps entered the New World. The most obvious link appears in early projectile technology. Siberian spear points were narrow, symmetrical, and flaked with incredible accuracy, designed to withstand impact on thick-skinned animals. Those same characteristics show up in the earliest American spear points. Later, as both groups adapted to new landscapes, their tools evolved, but the underlying engineering remained. The transition from thrusting spears to the atlatl, a lever that launched darts with devastating force, appears on both continents. This device wasn't just a weapon. It allowed hunters to strike from a distance, conserve energy, and stay out of reach of dangerous prey. Trapping methods also reveal striking parallels. In Siberia, deadfalls, snares, and funnel traps were essential for capturing small game. The earliest Native American traps work almost the same way, using tension, balance, and animal behavior to guide prey into predictable paths. These tools didn't rely on luck. They relied on careful observation of seasons, migration routes, and feeding patterns. Firecraft forms another undeniable link. Both groups mastered techniques for starting flames in wet, cold conditions where modern gear would fail. Using a combination of dry inner bark, resin-rich wood, and friction-based tools, they produced fire reliably, often under conditions where a single mistake could mean a fatal night. And then there's shelter. Early Siberian structures, low, insulated, aerodynamic, and reinforced with bones, wood, and hides, mirror the earliest shelters in northern North America. Both were built to trap heat, block wind, and withstand heavy snow without collapsing. None of this happened by chance. These tools and tactics weren't simple inventions. They were survival strategies carried across continents and sharpened in new environments. Survival in harsh climates demanded more than strong shelters and accurate hunting tools. It required a deep understanding of plants. Which ones healed, which ones soothed pain, which ones brought down fevers, and which ones could be dangerous if handled incorrectly. When you look closely at the healing practices of ancient Siberian groups and early Native American communities, the similarities stand out clearly, not because they copied one another, but because both environments required people to pay close attention to what the land offered. In Siberia, cold forests held a surprising range of medicinal plants. Pine sap treated wounds. Willow bark eased fevers. Juniper branches were steamed or crushed to address breathing problems during freezing winters. These weren't random discoveries. They were the result of long-term observation, seeing which plants animals sought out when injured, noticing what stopped infections, and testing small amounts over time. Cross into early North America, and you find many of the same patterns. Tribes living in northern forests relied on spruce pitch to seal wounds, willow bark for pain, yarrow to control bleeding, and conifer teas to restore strength during long winters. On the plains, roots and leaves from prairie plants served as treatments for stomach issues, dehydration, or inflammation. In the West, desert shrubs offered potent remedies for burns, infections, and respiratory issues. Neither side relied on guesswork. Healing specialists, individuals trained through long apprenticeships, memorized plant characteristics, learned correct doses, and kept track of seasonal availability. These roles existed across both Siberian and early American groups, shaped not by mystical authority, but by long experience and responsibility to the community. Another shared trait was sustainable harvesting. Both traditions gathered plants carefully, leaving enough for regrowth and never stripping entire areas. This approach wasn't symbolic, it was practical. The next season's survival depended on maintaining healthy plant populations. Through trial, teaching, and consistency, both worlds built effective healing systems long before laboratories or written records. Their shared emphasis on practical plant knowledge reveals yet another thread connecting Siberia to the early Americas, a thread woven through the roots, leaves, and medicines of the land. Long before insulated jackets, waterproof boots, or synthetic fabrics existed, people in Siberia and early North America engineered clothing that allowed them to move, hunt, and work in temperatures that could freeze exposed skin within minutes. These weren't fashion choices. They were life-saving systems, built from natural materials, but designed with the same precision we see in modern cold-weather gear. And when you compare Siberian clothing traditions with those of northern Native American communities, the overlap is unmistakable. In Siberia, heavy fur garments formed the outer layer. Hides from reindeer, elk, or fox, arranged so the fur faced outward, trapping warm air close to the body. Underneath, lighter skins created a breathable inner layer. Seams were stitched with fine sinew thread, pulled tight enough to block wind, yet flexible enough for movement. Boots were lined with grass or moss that absorbed moisture and kept feet warm even when walking through snow. Cross into early North America, especially among Arctic and subarctic groups, and you find a nearly identical approach. People crafted double-layered parkas from caribou or sealskin, using the same fur-out, fur-in design perfected in Siberia. Sewn with bone needles and sinew thread, these garments shed wind, resisted moisture, and kept heat in without trapping sweat, a crucial detail in freezing environments where dampness could be fatal. Footwear followed similar engineering principles. Boots lined with soft plant fibers or fur acted like natural insulation that could be replaced daily. Even the structure of clothing pieces shows a shared foundation. Hoods were shaped to channel breath away from the face to prevent frost buildup. Mittens were worn over inner gloves for layered warmth. Belts and ties were placed strategically to reduce heat loss at the waist and wrists. Both Siberian and early Native American makers approached clothing as a survival system, not just attire. Tailoring layers, selecting materials with specific properties, and designing every detail to counter cold in ways modern outdoor clothing still imitates. When temperatures drop so low that breath freezes in the air, shelter becomes more than comfort. It becomes a line between life and death. The people who crossed from Siberia into the early Americas understood this deeply. They had already spent generations building structures that could withstand blizzards, relentless winds, and months of freezing darkness. And when you compare their methods to the earliest shelters in North America, the connection is impossible to miss. In Siberia, winter homes were built low to the ground to reduce wind exposure. Many were partially dug into the earth, using soil itself as insulation. Frames made from wood, bone, or driftwood were covered with hides, turf, and layers of vegetation. These structures didn't rely on brute strength. They relied on smart design. A low entrance tunnel blocked cold air, forcing it to sink and stay outside. Sleeping platforms were elevated to stay above drafts. Fire pits were placed in specific positions so heat would circulate evenly. Move across the ancient land bridge into early Alaska and northern Canada, and you see the same principles. Subterranean homes with tunnel entrances. Thick coverings made from hides, turf, or snow blocks. Frameworks built from driftwood along the coast and from bones in inland areas where wood was scarce. Even the shape of the dwellings mirrored their Siberian counterparts. Rounded structures that allowed snow to pile on top without sinking the roof. Snow wasn't a threat. It was insulation that trapped heat. Portable shelters also reveal a shared origin. Siberian groups used lightweight, conical, or domed frames covered with hides for seasonal travel. Early Native American travelers in northern regions did the same, adjusting shapes and materials based on local availability, but keeping the core engineering intact. Aerodynamic forms, overlapping materials, and strategic venting to release smoke without losing warmth. These shelters didn't succeed because of luck. They succeeded because their builders understood airflow, insulation, and structural balance long before textbooks existed. The designs that kept Siberian families alive through brutal winters became the foundation for early Arctic and subarctic survival in the New World. Surviving in open wilderness requires more than strong tools and warm clothing. It demands the ability to move through vast landscapes with accuracy, to travel without maps, without compasses, and without written guides. The people who left Siberia for the Americas brought with them a set of skills that turned the land itself into a navigational system. When you compare early Siberian methods with those used by ancient Native American communities, the parallels reveal a shared legacy of reading terrain with remarkable precision. In Siberia's endless forests and frozen plains, travelers couldn't rely on fixed landmarks. Instead, they studied the environment. The direction of prevailing winds shaped tree growth. Snowdrifts revealed where storms typically gathered. The angle of sunlight across frozen rivers indicated safe passages. Hunters read tracks not just by shape, but by weight distribution, stride length, and the slightest disruptions in snow or soil. These observations guided movement through regions where getting lost meant real danger. When these groups reached the Americas, the skill set didn't fade, it expanded. Early Native American travelers read landscapes the same way, by paying attention to subtle patterns. On the plains, the sway of grasses showed wind direction. In forested regions, moss growth combined with animal trails helped chart safe routes. In the southwest, rock formations held shadows that shifted with the seasons, offering clues about orientation. Rivers, migration paths, star positions, and animal behavior all contributed to decisions about when and where to move. Tracking was a shared expertise across both worlds. A broken twig, a shifted pebble, a patch of disturbed snow. These tiny signs became full stories. Hunters could estimate the age, size, and condition of an animal simply from a trail. They could follow herds for days with no hesitation, adjusting their path based on experience rather than guesswork. This wasn't instinct, it was training, patient, disciplined, and practiced from childhood. The same approach that guided Siberian groups across a frozen land bridge later shaped how native communities navigated new continents with confidence. Survival in freezing environments isn't just about staying warm. It's about keeping food safe, edible, and nutritious through long stretches when hunting becomes unpredictable. In ancient Siberia, this challenge shaped entire systems of preservation, many of which reappear in early Native American traditions across the north. These techniques didn't rely on salt mines, metal containers, or refrigeration. They relied on timing, observation, and methods refined through trial and necessity. In Siberia, the cold itself became an ally. Meat from large animals was sliced thin and frozen quickly in open air, where temperatures acted like a natural deep freezer. Fish were dried over low smoke, hung under sheltering branches, or stacked carefully to avoid moisture buildup. Fat was stored separately in containers lined with hide or bark, providing long-lasting energy during the dark winter months. Nothing was left vulnerable to time. Every cut, rack, and bundle had a purpose. Cross to early North America, and you find almost identical approaches. In the Arctic and subarctic, fish were dried on raised racks to allow air circulation without attracting scavengers. Meat from caribou or seal was cut into strips and kept in cold pits or packed in layers of rendered fat to extend its shelf life. In regions with steady winter winds, thin cuts of meat hardened into reliable, lightweight food that could be carried for days. This method wasn't improvisation. It was a carefully managed system that ensured families stayed nourished when storms or darkness limited hunting. Both worlds mastered fat storage as well. Rendered animal fat was combined with dried meat and berries in mixtures that provided high calories with minimal bulk. These foods didn't spoil easily and could be rationed through long travel or difficult seasons. Even plants were preserved using similar principles. Roots and berries were buried in cool earth or stored in containers sealed with animal hide. In climates where growing seasons were short, these methods kept communities fed when the land offered little. The knowledge carried across continents wasn't about abundance, it was about strategy. Food preservation became a form of protection, ensuring survival when the environment turned unforgiving.